Jessica Brittany Miller was born on September 11, 1984, in Atlanta, Georgia, to parents Billy and Donna. In 2003, 19-year-old Jessica was the mother of a toddler named Maddie. That same year, she married 41-year-old Adolph Neal, who went by Sonny, and he soon adopted Maddie. They then spent the next 8 years investing in real estate, and in 2012, they opened a tanning salon and boutique called Dazzle. Jessica was happy but continued school because she really wanted to be a dental hygienist. Unfortunately, their marriage was on the rocks, and they had begun seeing other people. However, they kept their troubles secret and still portrayed the perfect marriage and perfect home. Unfortunately, at their home in Dalton, Georgia, where all three lived, including her grandfather, 69-year-old Donald Shedd, a horrible tragedy would occur. Jessica's father, Billy, and her stepmother had left Savannah, Georgia, and moved in with them while they were working on opening a new bar. However, their stay was short after Sonny kicked them out. That's when they realized not everything was as it seemed, and knew now that their daughter's marriage was quickly coming to an end. They began trying to help her, but she refused to let them. On May 23, 2012, while at lunch with her stepmother, she told her she was finally done with Sonny and going to get a divorce. She also said Sonny had begged her for another chance, which she rejected. That night, she sent her father, Billy, a text that read, "All hell is breaking loose," after she and Sonny got into a nasty argument. Billy offered to come over, but she unfortunately said no. That was, sadly, the last time they ever heard from her. The following morning, around 7 o'clock, a neighbor opened their door to find Maddie crying and saying that her great-grandfather was dead and she couldn't find her parents. 911 was quickly called, and when police arrived, they found Jessica dead in the pool house. She had tragically been beaten and stabbed to death. Her grandfather, Don, was found dead in the kitchen. He had also been beaten to death in what investigators described as an extreme overkill. However, Sonny was strangely nowhere to be found, and all the vehicles were still at the home. A manhunt ensued for a week before police received a tip that Sonny was spotted walking down Highway 201 and headed toward Varnell. This area is about 14 miles from their house, and police were quickly able to capture him. When he was brought in for his interview, he admitted to the murders and said he was mixing Xanax and alcohol that night. This allegedly caused him to go into an explosive emotional rage, but Jessica's family doesn't believe it. They instead think he's a narcissistic sociopath who cheated and abused Jessica before finally murdering her. In order to avoid a trial and have Maddie having to testify, they agreed to Sonny being offered a plea deal that would allow him to plead guilty and be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the end, he accepted the deal in order to avoid the death penalty. Veronica Claire Butler was born on February 28, 1997, to parents Clinton and Amanda. After high school, she became a certified nursing assistant and began working at various nursing homes. She was said to enjoy cooking, gardening, and dancing, and was described as a warm and generous individual. In 2019, she met and fell in love with Tracy Lee Pites, and for the next 5 years, they shared every bit of their lives together until a horrible tragedy took her away from him. Unfortunately, before meeting Tracy, she was involved with a man named Wrangler Rickman, who she had 2 children with. By 2024, the two were going through a bitter custody battle, and her friend, 39-year-old Jilian Kelley, was her court-appointed supervisor for her Saturday visitation rights with the kids. Everything had been going Veronica's way, and the court was about to issue her unsupervised visitation rights. Unfortunately, that upcoming decision is what fueled a group of crazy individuals to murder her. On Saturday, March 30th, 2024, Veronica made plans to meet Wrangler's mother, Tiffany Adams, at Four Corners in Texas County, Oklahoma, to pick up her children, ages 6 and 8, to take them to a birthday party. However, after Veronica and Jilian left to go pick them up, they were never seen alive again. When they failed to show up at the birthday party, Veronica's family went to the location where they were supposed to pick up the children. Upon arriving, they found the car they were in, but no signs of either woman. However, they did notice blood on the ground around the car and on the road and realized something terrible had happened. Also at the scene were Veronica's glasses, a broken hammer, and Jilian's purse. Inside her purse was a pistol magazine, but the gun was missing. Investigators checked their phone records and found that they were either turned off or destroyed at about 9:42 that morning. The last place they pinged was at the home of Cole and Cora Twombly, on property owned by James Beasley, who went by Jamie, about 8.5 miles from where the car was found. 2 days after their disappearance, on April 1st, investigators got a search warrant to search Tiffany's phone. That's when they discovered Google searches for taser pain levels, gun shops, prepaid cell phones, and how to get someone out of their house. They also learned that a month earlier, on February 13th, 2024, Tiffany had purchased 3 prepaid cell phones that all pinged in the area where Veronica's car was found. Investigators then started looking into Tiffany's boyfriend, Tad Burt Cullum, and learned that he rented a pasture for cattle grazing from Jamie in the same location where the women's cell phones last pinged. Jamie said that Tad asked him on March 28th if he would cut down a tree, remove the stump, bury some concrete, and do some dirt work below the dam. On the night of March 29th, Jamie saw Tad's skid steer parked on the property, but by the following morning, it was gone. On Sunday, March 31st, Tad admitted to Jamie that people were looking at him for the disappearances of Veronica and Kelley, and also expressed worry about the suspicious skid steer tracks on the property. Jamie allegedly told him that he would be honest if investigators asked him. Meanwhile, investigators had learned that Tiffany bought 5 stun guns at a store in Guyman, Oklahoma on March 23rd. 13 days later, on April 13th, law enforcement agents executed a search warrant on the property, especially the area where Tad had done work. That's when they discovered Veronica and Jilian's bodies in a freezer buried in the ground, along with one of the stun guns Tiffany bought. Also buried were several articles of clothing with blood stains, including 2 sweatshirts, t-shirts, cloth gloves, a black K-bar knife in sheath, and duct tape. She, Tad, Cora, and Cole were then all arrested and charged with the murders. When Tad was arrested, he had a rifle, ammunition, body armor, and a go bag prepared at his home. Also, there was 31-year-old Paul Grice, and police noticed he had a bandage on his right pinky. When asked what happened, he claimed he had hurt himself working on a truck. However, a witness came forward on April 18th and told investigators that Paul admitted his DNA would be found with the bodies. He also asked them 3 questions: how long it would take to process DNA evidence, how long would DNA last in dirt if it was being churned, and do you know how to get a guy and his family into Mexico? After learning that, he was also arrested. When Tiffany was brought into the police station for further questioning, she openly admitted to being involved. Cora and Cole's 16-year-old daughter also told investigators that her mother admitted that she and the other suspects had murdered Veronica and Jilian and had told her on March 29th that they were going on a mission. When they returned home the following day, they instructed her to clean up their truck and told her they never had to worry about Veronica again. She then asked them why Jilian had to die, to which they responded because she supported Veronica. In a shocking twist, this was not the group's first attempt at murdering Veronica. In February 2024, they came up with a plan to drive in front of her and throw an anvil through her windshield. But Veronica never left her house and the plan was called off. Come to find out, all 5 individuals were part of an anti-government group with religious affiliation called God's Misfits. Cora even regularly hosted meetings for the group at their home. However, the group has since condemned the actions of the 5 individuals and said that is not what the group is about. All 5 individuals were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of kidnapping and conspiracy. Many of the items found are being tested for DNA, and prosecutors are hoping the results will seal the suspect's fate. However, as of August 2024, they are all currently in jail without bonds, awaiting the outcome of the case. Channing Elizabeth Freelove was born on November 12, 1974, in Fort Worth, Texas, to parents John and Jana. Channing was a very smart student, graduating summa cum laude from R.L. Paschal High School, where she also excelled at soccer. Unfortunately, she also got herself involved in drugs. After high school, she received a $1,000 scholarship to attend Texas Christian University, also known as TCU, and moved into an apartment with 18-year-old Melanie Louisa Golchert. Channing was a pre-med student taking advanced placement courses, while Melanie, who was born in Perth, Western Australia on June 8, 1975, attended Tarrant County Junior College. Their freshman year was off to a great start until a horrible tragedy occurred. Leading up to the tragedy, Channing had begun dealing drugs in order to make some extra money, and that's how she met Brandy Sorelli and Sherry Sykes. She supplied them with drugs and had been engaged in a relationship with each woman. However, the relationship with Sykes was short-lived after Channing and Sorelli slept together. Sykes then moved Sorelli in with her, which upset Channing, who showed up at their apartment in a jealous rage, brandishing a pistol and threatening to take her own life. She even tried to jump off their balcony and had to be restrained. Also at the apartment were 19-year-old Melvin James White II, aka Boot, and 22-year-old Darren Deshawn Curl, aka Taz, who were members of the gang Crips and had bought weed from Channing in the past. Once Channing calmed down and left, Sykes said, and I quote, "I'm so angry with her I could kill her." Brandy was also overheard saying, and I quote, "I'm sick of Channing's high school crap. If she ever comes around here again, I'll get rid of her my way." Not long after, on November 11, 1993, Sykes called Channing and asked her to go to dinner so they could work out their differences. Melanie wasn't involved in the drug side of Channing's life, but usually tagged along to make sure she stayed safe. When she and Channing met Sykes at dinner, they had no idea that she was having someone break into their apartment and steal several pounds of marijuana that Channing had recently received from her supplier. This allegedly happened twice and put Channing in a horrible bind because now she only had 1 pound left and owed her supplier $6,000. At dinner that night, Sykes told them that she and Sorelli were heading to Arkansas the next day to visit relatives. The following day, on her 19th birthday, Channing finally confessed to her parents about what she had been doing in a desperate attempt to get the $6,000, telling them she had to pay or her supplier would kill her. A friend of hers even heard her on the phone with the supplier pleading for her life. Unfortunately, they either didn't have the money or refused to give it to her, and she left with nothing but her mother's car. That night, she, Melanie, and another female student named Mary Tuttle went out to celebrate. After returning home, Channing's beeper went off around 10:30 p.m., and she called the number back. It was the leader of the Project Watts Crips, Boot White, and he wanted to buy all the weed she had left. She found this strange because he had never bought that much before, so she made sure to bring her pistol with her. Melanie was also worried and decided to tag along. Channing tucked her pistol in her waistband, and they left the apartment together, never to be seen alive again. Shortly before 4 a.m., a man riding his bicycle passed a 1984 Oldsmobile parked in the driveway of a home that was typically vacant. On each side of the car, illuminated only by the street lamp, he saw 2 bodies lying face down. The police were called, and when investigators arrived, they identified the bodies as belonging to Channing and Melanie. Both had been shot to death, and Channing's pistol was still in her waistband, which means she likely was caught off guard. The murder weapon was determined to be a .380 caliber handgun. The case wouldn't take long to solve after 2 informants came forward and told police that Sykes and Sorelli had approached them about killing Channing. 2 days after the murders, the women were arrested and charged with solicitation of capital murder. They were also found with 4 pounds of the missing weed. However, investigators didn't believe they pulled the trigger and were looking for White and Curl, whom they believed had actually carried out the horrible deed. On November 18th, 6 days after the murders, police received a 911 call from a grocery store reporting that 2 men were harassing the store clerks. When they arrived, they discovered the men were White and Curl, who already had warrants out for their arrest. They were arrested at the scene and charged with capital murder. 6 days later, it was determined that Sykes and Sorelli never hired them to carry out the murders, and they did it themselves because they wanted to steal the weed that Channing had. Come to find out, Curl had talked on numerous occasions about killing Channing and robbing her. Once it was determined that Sykes and Sorelli really had nothing to do with the murders, the charges were dismissed in January 1994. In the end, Sykes and Sorelli pleaded guilty to drug charges and were both sentenced to 10 years probation. Most believe the women got off easy, especially considering they stole Channing's weed and didn't care that her supplier might kill her because of it. Curl was offered a plea deal but refused and took his case to trial. His defense argued that Curl only murdered the women because White would kill him if he didn't. However, a fellow gang member by the name of Darrell Ellis would testify that on the morning of the murders, he showed up at Curl's apartment and found him wiping blood off his .380 caliber handgun. Curl then drove Ellis by the crime scene while police were there examining it. He then bragged about killing Channing and seeing the horrified look on Melanie's face after she realized she was next. The two men then drove to some railroad tracks and hid the gun under some brush. White and Curl were also suspects in the murder of Robert Crenshaw, who worked as a cook at a restaurant. Curl was also linked to 2 drive-by shootings and a jailhouse assault on a deaf-mute prisoner. In the end, he was found guilty of capital murder and was sentenced to life in prison. 5 weeks later, White pleaded guilty and was also sentenced to life in prison. Sadly, it turns out that her supplier had actually believed her when she told him she had been robbed and was willing to work with her on it. If it weren't for Curl and White, both women would likely still be alive. Noah Kenneth Bush was born on January 22, 2016, to Demetrius and Antonio. In 2024, 8-year-old Noah was living in Jessup, Georgia, with his mother and her boyfriend, Stephen Fuller. Noah was in the 2nd grade at James E. Bacon and was described as a very lively and loving child who showed a lot of ambition. He loved playing sports and video games and dreamed of one day playing in the NBA. Unfortunately, he would never get the chance. On May 15, 2024, at about 9 p.m., Noah left his home on foot with 2 boys he knew, ages 10 and 11, never to be seen alive again. When he hadn't returned by 9:10 p.m., his family reported him missing, and a search quickly ensued. That night at 12:30 a.m., a pair of children's shoes were found near a borrow pit, and Noah's family confirmed they were his. Divers entered the water around 3:04 a.m., but after an hour of not finding anything, they decided it would be better to drain the water out. However, the pump broke, and at 8 a.m., the divers got back in the water, and within 15 minutes, they sadly found Noah's body. At first, authorities didn't suspect foul play, since the autopsy determined he had no injuries and died from drowning. Regardless, his family was adamant that he was afraid of the water and would have never been near the borrow pit at the construction site. The community also believed there was more to the story. A few weeks later, investigators discovered some new information that shocked everyone when the 10 and 11-year-old that Noah was seen with were arrested. The boys had let it slip that one of them had pushed Noah into the deep portion of the borrow pit that they were wading in after getting into an argument. One of the boys' mothers, Natalie Hardison, was also arrested and charged with probation violation and making false statements. As for the 11-year-old, he's been charged with involuntary manslaughter, and the 10-year-old has been charged with concealing the death of another. As of August 2024, all 3 are in custody, awaiting the outcome of the case. Susan Heather Stubbs was born on August 11, 1974, in Russellville, Arkansas, to parents Jerry and Shirley, and went by her middle name. In 2016, 41-year-old Heather was living in Conway, Arkansas, and was the mother of 3. Unfortunately, she was dating Scotty Ray Gardner, a dangerous career criminal who was paroled on December 4, 2014, after serving 23 years in a state prison for attempted murder. He was charged with that after shooting his 6-month pregnant wife 7 times. Before that, he served 3 years in prison starting in 1986. Not so surprisingly, the relationship quickly turned tumultuous, and Heather obtained an order of protection against him. However, she later requested it to be dropped. On March 6, 2016, Heather and Gardner returned to their motel room at the Days Inn in Conway, Arkansas, after attending church, when they got into a nasty argument. At some point, Heather pushed him, and he retaliated by throwing her on the bed and choking her. He then found a cord in the room and strangled her to death. After she was dead, Gardner stole her $240 and 2 cell phones. He then told the motel clerk that he would be back later to pay the bill, but when he didn't return later that day, she decided to check the room. That's when she found Heather's body. After fleeing the scene, he sold Heather's phone for $150 and sold an iPad and watch in the parking lot of a casino in Oklahoma. However, he wasn't alone and had 2 other men with him. After leaving the casino the following morning, all 3 returned to Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is where police were able to track him down. Once he was in custody, he was taken back to Conway and brought in for questioning, and actually confessed to the murder. He had also told his ex-wife, Jewel McGinty, before the murder that he was going to kill Heather. He then confessed to Jewel after the murder and said she got what she deserved. In the end, Gardner was found guilty of capital murder after jurors deliberated for only 12 minutes. He was then sentenced to death.